Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so very much for taking the time to join me here to learn and to grow. This is the final part of our March marketing madness, and I really took it to another level today. I have 4 amazing guests, and since this is the final episode, I thought I'd call this the final 4 of our March madness. And all 4 of our wonderful guests are part of Marketing4ECPs. And if you're an eye care professional, I can't imagine you haven't heard of Marketing4ECPs, but just in case, and I know there are people in the audience who are from other industries. Marketing4ECPs is a marketing agency that caters specifically to eye care professionals, hence the 4 ECPs. But if you happen to be tuning in from other industries, I know, again, I have friends and colleagues from other places that are tuning in for the marketing advice. I know that there's going to be tons and tons of value that's applicable across industries, right? It transcends the boundaries of certain professions. So make sure you stay tuned. Just because the name is 4 ECPs doesn't mean it's not for you. So we are going to dive into 4 different topics, and we're going to do our best to really bring the most important topics or the most important facts and features of each of these to you guys. We're going to talk about SEO, web design, social media, Google ads. These are all things that on social media, you guys really expressed that you wanted to hear about. So make sure you stay tuned for the entire episode and grab a pen and paper and write everything down that you hear here. And if you're driving, go back and listen to this again, wherever you can. Make sure you absorb all of this information, because I know you're going to be able to put it into action right away. So without further ado, let me introduce our amazing guests. First, we have Peyton Karch. Peyton, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Great. Peyton, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. My name is Peyton, and I work on the Google Ads aspect of it for Marketing4ECPs. I've been doing it for about 2 years now with Marketing4ECPs, and I have a background in engineering, but always with a lean towards like statistical analysis, data analytics. And so that's kind of how I ended up at Marketing4ECPs. And I've been loving it so far.
That's awesome. That all of that you just said there, especially like the data analysis, statistical analysis. I know specifically there are multiple people who've messaged me wanting to learn more about. There's a lot of like nerdy, geeky people out there, including myself. So please feel free to dive deep into that when you get a chance.
For sure.
Next, we have Brynn Lowe.
Hi. I'm Brynn Lowe. I'm the manager of SEO at Marketing4ECPs. And if you don't know what SEO is, that's basically search engine optimization. So I make stuff show up better in Google, essentially.
Perfect. We need to know more about that for sure. And next is Diana Prakash.
Hi, I'm Diana Prakash. Actually, it's Diana Maleshri now. I am the manager of graphic design and art direction with Marketing4ECPs. I've been in this industry for 5 years, been a designer for longer than that, but definitely been showing off my expertise in Marketing4ECPs for 5 years.
Yeah, no doubt. If anybody's seen the designs that you guys come up with, for sure, I can vouch for that. And I can vouch for that on my own personal experience. Actually, I should have mentioned this off the top. Little disclaimer. We use Marketing4ECPs for our practices. We're actually in the process of getting our websites built and polished up right now, but very, very happy with the process and the product so far. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Finally, in our final 4 here, we have Tyler Kemp.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Tyler. I am the manager of brand engagement, and our brand engagement department encapsulates our social media and our email marketing projects and objectives. And we realized about a year ago that the email department and the social media department were really having a lot of the same meetings with the same clients. And we realized it could be a much more cohesive experience, just an overall better branding experience.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think while we all think of social media a lot, as optometrists, as business owners, I don't think we think about email marketing in nearly enough. So we'll definitely be sure to touch on that. So to bring it, to start with one specific point here, my understanding of this all is the one kind of common denominator to all of these things, SEO, Google Ads, social media, all of this, is you need to have a really good website, right? That's kind of ground zero. So I see everybody nodding. So I'm glad I'm right about that part at least. So Diana, why don't, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, what makes a good website? What should a business owner look to have?
So a good design will definitely help you with creating the first impression. Without that first impression or the brand consistency, you're going to lose trust. When the user comes into your site and they see a bad design or an outdated information, they're going to be like, well, they don't care about their business. They don't probably invest in themselves enough. Why should I go invest my money in their business? So we don't want people to think that way. And that's when the branding comes into play. Branding will help you get recognition. It will give you a competitive edge because your competitors are already doing this. When you work on your brand, it shows, it builds trust. It makes you look like you know what you're doing with your business. You take care of your business, you take care of your customers, your patients. All of that kind of impression is so important when it comes to design. And that's why a good website is so vital.
And absolutely agree. I think it really is that first impression of like, what is this business about? What is the person about? And yeah, I like that what you said, that like if this person doesn't care to invest and make themselves, it's sort of, I guess, like when you're dressed up to go to an event sort of thing. If you show up kind of disheveled, people will be like, oh, this guy clearly doesn't care to really be show up for everybody else.
Right.
Are there specific like technical like features, whether it's like the look of the website or the user experience, that we should be looking to make sure we have?
For sure. The first thing that comes to my mind is good navigation. So when someone comes into your site, they shouldn't be clicking around too much to find the information they're looking for. It should be so easy. Okay, if I want to know about this practice, I need to go click on this About Us button, and then all the information related to that practice should drop down in that navigation. And if they're finding information about the location, maybe the person already knows enough about this practice and they're just looking for the information to make a phone call and book an appointment. That information should be front and center and easy to find wherever they are on the website. So having a solid navigation is one of the most important feature to have in your website. The second thing I can think of is responsiveness. We live in a day and age where we have so many different types of devices we access the information from. One website can be accessed from mobile, tablet, and desktop. And that's just the device. Now we have to think about different screen sizes of all these devices. Mm-hmm. So the information should not be shorted anywhere. It should be consistent, and the images that we use or videos that we use should be responsive on all the screens. The next thing I think is it's the style guide, the consistency of the brand. When they come to your site, they look at your logo and where the information is placed and how it's placed, the voice of the brand and the colors of the brand, the consistency of the fonts, how it's laid out, all of that converts into trust. So the style guide and the style of your whole brand is so important. And those are the top three things I can think of.
Yeah, those are all good, really, really good pieces of information there. I think this is definitely a first world problem, but like one of my two pet peeves when I go on any website is, one, it takes too long to load. Like if I click on, I'm like sitting there waiting for that, right? This is a 2022 problem, I know. But the other one is like when I'm going to a website on my phone and I have to I'm trying to zoom in on stuff, but then it like moves and it's not really like reactive to the device. Okay. Now I'm like, okay, I have to go to my desktop to use this website properly. For sure that part is, again, I know, first world problem, but that's why we're here in this conversation.
But you'd be surprised. It's not actually first world problem. The page speed, it impacts how long a user stays on the website. When we're talking about a competitive edge, it's if your site is too slow, but your competitor's site doesn't look that great, but it performs better by loading faster, you're going to lose your conversion. So that's why equally optimizing your website design, not just making it look pretty, but optimizing it to convert your leads is so important by making the page speed better.
Okay. So that's all really amazing. So once we have a good functional website, responsive, usable on different platforms and devices. What's the next step? We got to make sure we're optimized for Google. Would SEO be the next kind of big topic that we'd want to touch on?
Yeah, and a lot of that ties into SEO really well. Like, I'm really glad Diana brought up like having a responsive website on mobile, because Google actually does something called mobile first indexing. And all that means is when Google is deciding where to put your website in the search results, they actually look at how your website appears on a cell phone versus on a desktop. So it doesn't really matter how good your website looks on a desktop, because Google's not looking at that. It's looking at how it looks on a phone. So that's really important, as well as the page speed and things like that are crucial for SEO. So when we do SEO, we do a couple different tactics. We can do things like blog posts, which helps your website show up for more search queries. But really, the website is the foundation. If you don't have a good website, like even for our clients, we won't be doing things like blog posts or anything like that, because the website really is the most important piece.
And so once we have this, website in Google, nice to know what Google's looking for. So I was thinking, just having a website that's functional and mobile is just for the user experience, but actually it's going to help us rank higher in SEO as well. What other things can a business owner do to make sure that they're ranking up higher organically?
That's a good question. So like I mentioned before, there are a lot of tactics we use, but if I can simplify it down to one thing, is all Google. And when I say Google, I'm kind of using Google to encompass all search engines, because that's what the majority of
there's
people...
other search engines out there? I didn't even realize.
Exactly. That's what like 98% of people use.
Right.
Yeah. So when Google is trying to rank different websites, all Google's algorithm is trying to understand is how people use the internet and interact with websites. So if you always keep in mind the user experience and how patients or customers are actually interacting with your website, then you should be doing well from a search engine optimization perspective. A lot of people think SEO is really complicated and you have to do like weird stuff that kind of doesn't make any sense. And like, it can get a little complicated, but really if you remember the user, then SEO is pretty simple.
I like that. Okay. Remember the user. I tend to reference Jeff Bezos a lot. And I know Google is not Bezos, but like one of the things that I remembered from hearing from him, I think I read a book about him or something, was that he always has the customer in mind. Like when he has a meeting, he has like an empty seat. I don't know if he still does this, but empty seat. That's the customer seat. Like that's the person we're trying to think about. So I guess it makes sense for us as a business owner to always have that in mind too, right? It's like, who is using this website? What is going to make this website most functional for that person? You mentioned blogs. How important are blogs? Is that something that everybody should be writing blogs? And then how often should we be doing that?
That's a good question. So for blog posts, we use them as a tactic to get the website to rank for more keywords. And by keywords, I essentially just mean like search terms. So like, let's say you're an optometry practice and you have a page about eye exams. That page will probably show up if someone searches like eye exam Toronto, if you're in Toronto, let's say. But that page probably won't show up if someone is searching, how often do I need an eye exam? So if we had a blog post that was about how often you need an eye exam, then your website is showing up for both those search terms. So that's the idea of blog posts. It really just helps your website show up for more things.
I see. So I've heard sort of conflicting advice on this is like, okay, blogs are kind of dead. It's not really important. But from an SEO perspective, it's still valuable for us to have the more words we have on a page, the better. Ultimately, is that what or more words that we have on our website as a whole, the better?
Not necessarily. One thing to kind of keep in mind with SEO is that Google doesn't rank websites as a whole. It ranks individual pages. So one of the really important things for SEO is to have your pages targeted to certain search terms. So like using the eye exam example, all your different services, whether it's eye exams or like the contact lens fitting or like a frame gallery, those should all have their own unique pages because Google will rank them separately. The same thing goes for blog posts. When we do blogs for our clients, they target very specific searches, and that helps the individual pages show up better.
Gotcha. Good to know. Thank you. I think you're right. Overall, there's a lot of misconceptions about SEO, and I think it's just a really intimidating topic overall. As is Google Adwords, which we're going to go to in a second here. This seems like a big black box for a lot of people. But with the SEO, I think that's maybe the key takeaway, at least here in the early stages of the conversation, is keep it simple. Just think about your customer, the person who's going to be on the website, and have the information for them. And yeah, user-friendly website actually helps you rank better versus just a less user-friendly website. So that's really, really important. So yeah, as I mentioned, I think maybe in my mind anyways, the next natural topic is Google AdWords, since we're talking about Google, or Google Ads, I should say. So Peyton, if you wouldn't mind jumping in here, maybe just real basic, what are maybe some simple high level kind of things that people should know about Google Ads?
Yeah, for sure. And I would agree, kind of like Brynn, like we usually say that like Google Ads is just going to shine a spotlight on your website. So if you have a website that's just meh and you're sending traffic there, then people aren't going to take action and actually convert on your website. But if you have a website that's beautiful and well done, then those ads are going to shine a spotlight on that. You're going to get more traffic there. And so it all comes back to actually the website and making sure that is designed to be a good experience for the user. In terms of Google Ads, first recommendation would make sure you're tracking what's valuable on your website, and what actions you want to deem valuable. So for us, it's typically phone calls, form submissions, button clicks to third-party appointment schedulers. And so with that, it's not as much of a black box. If we weren't tracking anything, we could say, yeah, we're running Google Ads. This is how much we spent. This is how many clicks we got. But after that, we don't really know what's happening once they get to the website. And so we always want to make sure that we're actually tracking on the website. And this comes back to then we can look at what actions people are actually taking on the website. And with Google Ads, you can get pretty granular with the actual levers that you can pull, and you can target different locations, target different age ranges, different genders. And that's all data that's all available if you're tracking conversions. Otherwise, you're just looking at clicks. And then again, it's that black box. You don't know really what's going on. So I would always start by defining what is valuable for you and on your website and what actions are valuable, and then making sure that you have a way to track that.
Right. So on that note, as far as tracking and seeing conversions in that, one of the common conversations that I was having with some colleagues online and in person actually is ultimately the action I think we want. If you have a brick and mortar business, you want people walking in the door, right? And so, or calling to book an appointment, however you might end that trail. But and how would someone track that conversion from I see your clinic on Google now, I want as a business owner to track that person clicked it and actually ended up walking through the door. What's the process of that?
Yeah. So it's more difficult to track actual physical visits. And so we usually track phone call and we use programs that, basically they can record calls, do the call listening. And they're powerful to know where people are actually coming from. So whether they're coming from a Google ad, whether they're coming from a social post, we're able to track all of that. And then the other things we like to track are form submissions. So again, we can track where they came from when someone submits a form. But those are the two main things that we consider valuable and are easy to, I guess they're best to actually for transparency of knowing exactly what click someone clicked on, what ad someone clicked on, and knowing how they got to our website, and then filling out those forms or converting or making a phone call. And so I think that's the two most important actions that we take on the website. It's more difficult to track stuff like a location page visit. It's a little more vague if someone's looking at your location, and they may or may not come to your practice. It's kind of like a black box there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's part of the tricky part is like, I'll speak for myself, but I know there's other people out there. I would love to know that someone found me on Google and then walked in the door and somehow measure how many of those people ended up coming through the door. But that part is, you're saying that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, just especially with like more privacy laws, it's becoming more difficult as well to do stuff like that.
Sure. I know these are some of the features you're talking about are features that, you guys offer, Marketing4ECPs offers, and they're pretty cool, like powerful, like you said, very powerful tools to really be able to get down in nitty gritty and figure out how many people are interacting with us and coming through. Mm-hmm. How about somebody who's not yet working with Marketing4ECPs? Is there are there tips that you would say, like a way for me to numbers that I should look at, like data that would kind of give me some ideas of how much of those people are converting?
Yeah, I think if you know what kind of actions you want people to be taking on your website and what you can deem as a conversion, and then you can import those conversions back into Google Ads, and then it boils down to a conversion rate, or like a cost per conversion. And those are usually the metrics that we're going to optimize for in Google Ads. And so let's say, we typically would start with a bunch of different, what are called ad groups. And so we're targeting like eye care, eye exam, eye doctor, keywords like that. And then as the time goes by, we make some optimizations and see which one of those keywords are actually delivering the conversions, and which ones are delivering the actions that we deem valuable. And so if we are spending money on a keyword, for example, eye doctor, and we've seen that it hasn't delivered any conversions, then we're just going to pause that and we're going to allocate that budget somewhere else in Google Ads.
Gotcha.
And so Google Ads is also good. It shows you a market share of how many clicks you're showing up for, or how many impressions you're showing up for based on those keywords. And so you can say, hey, I'm spending, this one ad group is really performing well, but we're only at like 20% market share. So let's reallocate budget there. And so there are a lot of metrics that can show you where you can spend money and what you're spending money on that's actually producing valuable results.
Gotcha. So a little bit of, I guess that's your niche, is your data analytics and stuff. You have to analyze that data a little bit and reapply what you've learned from that. Maybe a bit of a basic question here. For an optometry clinic that's in a major city, or in a fairly large city, what do you think is a reasonable monthly ad spend for Google?
Yeah, I would always start with between $500 or $1,000. And again, like Google's going to show you those all that metrics, or those cost per conversion, market share metrics. And so if you start with, let's say $1,000, you can say, hey, we're only showing up 20% of the time, but on the back end, we're seeing that this is delivering us this many customers or this many patients. Then you can go in after and be like, hey, this has been valuable to us, and where there's more room to increase our budget, and stay. And as I say that, realistically staying at a similar cost per conversion without because you can expand your location and get more people, but as you expand out from a practice, you're not going to get the same return from someone who's 20 miles away as someone who's 2 miles away.
Budget, yeah, like monthly budget. But I had another question was then, I don't know if this is even a reasonable question, but like that cost per conversion, is there like a dollar value there that's sort of a good number, like a way to track how much it costs you to get that person to call you or something like that? Is there a way to track that type of thing?
Yeah. And so I would always say work back from kind of like an estimated average patient revenue. And so if you say, hey, our average new patient is $300, is going to bring us $300. And then you want to say, hey, what kind of percentage are we looking to spend at marketing? What kind of conversion rates are we getting if someone makes a phone call? And then kind of you work backwards from that to get to like a cost of how much you're kind of willing to pay for a new customer. And so, for us, it's kind of between that like $20 and $30 mark. is kind of what we're looking at as a good cost per conversion.
Got it. So $20 to $30. So if that patient was worth $300, and that's just on that one visit, not their lifetime value. Is that kind of how we're assessing this on that?
Yeah, typically just on the one visit is how we assess.
So it's roughly like, I mean, I guess it'll depend. Every clinic's going to be different. Some are maybe a little higher end clinics and their value may be 500 per, 600 per. But so would you say that it's safer to look at the absolute dollar value, $20, $30, or should it be like 10% of that customer's value to your office? Like what's the better way of looking at that?
Yeah, I think the metric there is how much marketing, like your marketing budget you want to spend.
Right.
And,
okay. Fair enough.
if you're looking to grow and you might want to spend a little more and acquire more patients, but if you're kind of just looking to maintain, then you might want that number to be a little lower.
Got it. All right. Thank you. And so different type of marketing and advertising. Tyler, if you wouldn't mind coming in on this one, social media and email marketing, what would you kind of consider to be, if you were to just rank them, I guess 1 and 2, which one would be the more important one to you?
Yeah, both have slightly different goals, but I'm going to say moving to social media is probably the first one that I would step to. And we are, as the brand engagement department, we're kind of what's known as an enhanced service within Marketing4ECPs. It's kind of the cool opportunity to utilize all the great stuff that has already been talked about in this first half hour here, that utilizing the information that's already created on the blogs, utilizing the great design that's present in the website, we can pull all that back into creating a really nice social media grid and just a social media presence that kind of talks about the same thing. But you really have different goals for social media and email. Social media is the chance to kind of tell your story and work on a long-term branding play, really enhance the voice that you've already really worked hard with the design team and with the content team to get right on your website, and pull that onto social media where people are, where your patients are. It's kind of just like another search engine that way, whereas email is kind of that way to remind the people that you've worked so hard to get through all of these other methods to come back to you, because you've got your patient list and it's a, hey, remember this, remember us? Is it time to come back to us again? And in the same sense, we can be utilizing some of that great social media and some of that great content to either remind people or drive them back to your website. Promoting some of the blogs that we've written in emails is a really great way to deliver some really interesting content in your email, and at the same time drive people back to your website and enhance the quality of the SEO program that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the common theme here is bringing people back to the website, right? I think that's kind of the key. With the email marketing, is it better to, or let me ask that question then. Is it better to do sort of a weekly or monthly newsletter, or just kind of reach out, I don't know, just when there's something going on? What's maybe the better approach for an office or business?
Having something consistent is always better across any of the kind of the enhanced services. So social media and email, it's the same thing that I hear it a lot, questions of, hey, I don't always have something new in the practice happening this week. Do I have to talk about something? Well, that's the opportunity to talk more about your history. That's the chance to talk about the services that you offer. There are multiple things that you can do to enhance the trust that your patients have in you. And that's telling your story. That's the peek behind the curtain of how things operate, introducing your team. And if you keep that consistent and keep it consistent on both social media and email, then you have that chance to really talk to your patients on multiple different platforms. It's the same kind of theory that if you're driving home and you see a billboard for a company and then you see their bus bench ad and then you hear them on the radio, you're probably going to remember them when you get home, whether it's conscious or unconscious. It's the same kind of thing, that if you hit them on multiple platforms, you have way better opportunity to drive home your message. Gotcha.
And on that note, again, with the email marketing then, or the newsletters or whatever this might be that we're sending out, again, somebody who may not be working with Marketing4ECPs yet, would you suggest that they're using something like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact or something like that to kind of arrange all of that?
Yeah, any of those are great. I know that for people starting out and doing it on their own, MailChimp can be a really easy one to work with. And really, ultimately, it comes down to your ability to look at the metrics, kind of the same way that Peyton does, kind of geeking out on that and looking at the data and the analytics, that influences the next email you put out. Because if you have a plan ahead of time and want to test out a few different topics with your patients and see what they respond to best, then that will indicate what you should send out next time to try and receive a better open rate or a better click-through rate. And on social media, that's going to result in more engagements and more people following your account. So ultimately, any of those ones that are free or kind of low cost options to get on, those are great. And it just comes down to, are you looking at the analytics that they're providing, and are you listening to that and responding to that? Because that's the best thing about social media and email, is that your patients literally tell you what they like.
Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. And I guess you need to have a decent sample size before you can like analyze that data and say, okay, this is working, that's working. So sending out one email and then sending out another one 6 months later and then trying to analyze that data may not be as useful. I know like on Facebook ads, you can do these like A/B testing, right? You can send out slightly different ads. And would you suggest doing that with an email blast as well? Like maybe send 50% of your patients this one and 50% slightly different wording or something like that and see how that goes? Or is it better to just each time just send the same thing to people? Or is it too complicated?
There's plenty of different methods. I think that if you're doing it on your own, then maybe sending out just the one and seeing how it performs and then trying a different topic the next time, that's always positive, but you can play around with it. And I mean, that's the benefit of working with an agency too, is that we have a team that we kind of look at it and say, what's something that we haven't tried? And based on the analytics, is this something that we think would work for them? Right. And kind of, it's, I'm not going to say trial and error, but I'm going to say trial and see what works better, because that's just, it's a long-term branding play on both social and email.
Right. On social media, do you recommend having sort of a very consistent, people will have, they'll use a certain filter or a border around their picture, so everything looks very, very uniform. Is that something you generally recommend for businesses, or does it really matter?
It absolutely matters in terms of the visual, but as we've done numerous times today, it all goes back to the website. If what you're doing on the website is using those kind of borders and using lots of cool colors and maybe some different assets that have been designed for your specific branding, make sure to use those in the same way on social media. You want to make sure that it's consistent, because if someone goes to your website and kind of starts to learn a little bit about your services, about your business, a lot of customer behavior is then going to say, cool, but what are they doing lately? Because I don't know when the website was made, and they often go to social media for something like that. If they arrive on your social media and it doesn't look the same as your website, they might actually question, is this the right business? And that might have them going and looking for one of your competitors instead, because they're not confident in your overall branding. So yes, the visual is huge, and we take a very focused approach to this, to making sure that we don't focus on too many topics. We really just focus on the key ones that are important to you. The topics are ultimately the most important thing, but having that visual component and utilizing what's already been created for your website is going to be essential for that overall branding component.
Gotcha. I see. Like the other.
Sorry, can I add something to what Tyler said? It goes back to the brand recognition, because without consistency, there will be no brand recognition, and it confuses them, leading to not trust your overall business.
Perfect. Exactly. I was just going to say, I feel like the one word that's kind of been consistent through this whole conversation is consistency, right? Is being consistent with bringing out your message on a regular basis, whether it's through emails and things like that. And the other thing is consistency across platforms, right? Making sure you kind of look and sound the same in all of these different channels. So that's really, really key. It sounds like a lot of work though, right? For one person or a couple of business, partners or whatever to, I got to make sure I build a good website. And then I got to make sure it's got the right SEO. And then I'm doing the ads, and then I'm making sure social media is like, this is a lot of stuff. Even for me, who's like super active on a lot of these things, I can like probably keep two of these things up above water for a while, but the other two are sort of lagging. So, I mean, I know the short answer to this question would be, well, hire Marketing4ECPs, right? But like, what else could business owners do? I mean, anybody who wants to jump in on this one, Do you have any kind of like suggestions or words of advice for somebody who's trying to start out their business and tackle all of these things by themselves?
I think that's a great question. I would say if you can only do some of it, especially in your example, if you're a brand new business, tactics like SEO and Google Ads will probably do a little bit better, just because like for things like email, you don't really have that patient base yet to be emailing. So things like Google Ad and SEO can help you get patients who aren't searching for a specific eye care practice or a specific business. And then you can move into more branding strategies like email, like social media.
Gotcha.
I would, to add to what Brynn said, when you have a solid design, you don't have to consistently go back and check if your design is working. You've created that, you've established a voice, you've established the way you are recognized, and then going into Google Ads and SEO will help. And then you don't have to keep going back. Oh, I need to change my brand because this piece isn't working, that piece isn't working. It's not really the case with branding. Now it's just the matter of maintaining. If you're able to only balance two things at a time, then it would be Google Ads and SEO, and then social media and branding will help move the boat along.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to social media management is that you have to be on it every day to have an effective social media presence. I think it's always going to improve your chances of engaging with your audience if you're on there responding to things and talking to people. But there are some really great programs that you can schedule posts out well in advance. And if you can dedicate 1 or 2 days a month, I know that with our program, we schedule out content for a quarter, and that allows us to put a strategy in place where we can focus on a few topics that we really want to nail home for our client. And then we can kind of plan out over the next quarter when we're going to deliver those. And once it's set, it's really just monitoring and making sure that everything is going out properly, that things are being responded to, all of those types of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to be on Instagram and Facebook every Tuesday and Thursday morning coming up with a new topic. It takes a little bit of pre-planning, but it can be really effective for business owners who don't necessarily have the time to be going back in on a weekly basis. Planning that ahead of time is almost more beneficial, because then you can make sure your strategy is in place and it stays consistent with what you set out initially.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, that's something I'm really bad at. I'm one of those who's like, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to post it now. And then like, if I don't have another idea for days, I won't post anything. But it's cool if you do it ahead of time, then you can actually, like you said, you can actually plan what messages, and you can have multiple messages in the same theme and all that ahead of time. That's really good. So as you guys know, in eye care, there's various niches and specialties, and other businesses have these different things too, right? Whether you're an accountant who specializes in something or a lawyer who specializes in something. Let's take dry eye, for example. That's something we do a lot of in our office. Let's say an office sort of specializes in something like this. Is there, from each of your perspectives, if you wouldn't mind sharing a few words, like what should I be doing as a practice that wants to lean into dry eye from a website perspective? Diane, if we can start with you. What should I make sure I have?
The right information and visuals that help with the topic you're talking about, because dry eye can be, it's just an umbrella term to talk about multiple things, and focusing on all at once and just making it content heavy wouldn't really work. So giving people a lot of different visuals to understand, whether it's an animation or video or just an image, all those technical terms to be converted into layman terms to make it easy to understand will definitely make the engagement in the website a lot better.
Great. And then anybody else from that perspective of having this niche in the office?
From a social media perspective, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier and thinking about your audience and kind of that Jeff Bezos idea of keeping that seat open for who your client or who your patient or customer is. It's considering what will be what's most interesting to them, considering when you're delivering that content, perhaps about dry eye. Are you what age and gender and income demographic are you speaking to? What kind of content are you choosing specifically to that's going to pique their interest? If you're looking to speak to moms in their 30s and 40s, you're probably going to get some really great impact if you talk about children, if you talk about people who are their age, and like kind of present that to them, something that's going to draw their interest in. So when you get specific like that, it's really just keeping your audience in mind and who you're speaking to, and not just putting out something that makes sense to you as a doctor, but something that would kind of pull on, I guess, the heartstrings and kind of break it down simply to understand for who you're speaking to.
Right. And then speaking of that sort of that demographic, then like we're talking about dry eyes, there's a specific demographic I want to reach, women in their 40s, let's just say. Should we be running ads to meet those people where they are, and Google or Facebook, or what ads should we be running here?
Yeah, definitely be running ads and specifying like which target you're looking at. I think with topics like dry eye, you have to be a little leery of people doing research, which isn't always the worst thing, but you don't want to necessarily drive traffic through your Google ads to someone who isn't going to bring you a return. And so you always have to be leery of that and what keywords you're actually showing up for. I think obviously with like someone searching for an eye exam or an eye doctor, they typically are looking for an exam, obviously. And so that it's easy to know that you might get some potential revenue there. But with like dry eye, you don't know if they're just doing research, what phase they are. And so you have to be a little more careful with what keywords you're using. But yeah, it's with like what ages and what genders you're targeting. If you're targeting those specific people who are more likely to have dry eye, or then you're better off targeting those people than just targeting everyone, and you're going to get people who might just be doing research or might not be as interested in it.
Makes sense. Actually, I didn't think about that part, right? Should we be, this again, maybe silly question here, but like the way we word those ads, should they be a little bit more like direct and even potentially, to use maybe misuse a word, but like aggressive, like, yeah. Do you have dry eyes, or do your eyes burn and feel like they're going to fall out of your head? Or should we just be more like gentle and subtle about it? What's kind of a better way to approach that?
I think the biggest thing is making sure the people who can see those ads know that it's that you service that and that is your main purpose of your website. And so that if they're doing research, we don't want an ad that says, hey, necessarily learn more about dry eye. Because it's like, hey, I'll click this ad, I'm going to learn more about dry eye, with no intention of ever calling you or filling out a form. And so like that messaging is important there, of like, hey, book your dry eye appointment today. You want call to actions like that where people you're calling people to come actually contact you or fill out a form, make a phone call, and not just kind of giving them wishy-washy, hey, learn about dry eye or see some dry eye images kind of thing. Perfect.
That's actually what I was getting at. Thank you. You phrased it much more eloquently than I did. So thanks for that. Awesome. Okay. So I'd love to sort of just open it up for you guys. If there's any sort of last things that you'd like to share on your specific areas of expertise that you feel business owners should know. And then perhaps how people can reach you guys after that. Not all at once.
I'll go with social media and then let everyone else say here. I think the biggest thing for anyone on social media is that it's not about reaching the most people. It's about reaching the right people. And that comes down to posting with a purpose. When you're creating content, you have to think about who you're actually wanting it to reach, and that you're using hashtags that are going to group your content into the right places, because gaining 100 followers from somewhere in a completely different country is going to be so much less valuable to you than gaining one follower of someone who might live in your community. And so It's about the right people, not the most people. And if you can put a real focus behind that with your content, with your targeting, just with your overall plan, you're going to be so much more effective and see it actually drive a lot more engagement than you would to just try and get as many followers as possible or as many likes as possible. The vanity metrics aren't the important thing there. It's about actually speaking to the people who are going to become your patients.
That's actually really good advice. I think we do tend to get caught up in those vanity metrics. Actually, since Tyler, since you were talking about that, I thought of another question. What's your stance on influencers? And, for an office, our office is in Surrey, BC. Should we be looking to use an influencer, and what's kind of a right approach for that?
I think it can be impactful at the right point in your social media strategy. If you are a practice with 100 followers or less, you paying an influencer or a micro influencer to be promoting your business, you might not see the same kind of impact as you would if you really get a really solid foundation to your profile behind there first. And when people actually come to your profile based on the recommendations or the push from these influencers, they have a breadth of content to read and really find value in it. So it really depends on the stage, and it also depends on the influencer. If it makes sense, absolutely. If you are an optometrist and you're using a food influencer in your area, it might not be their audience, might not be your audience. It all comes back down to that who you're trying to reach again, and if that person's or that influencer's audience is going to be relevant to yours. Because if they aren't, those are going to be a lot more of the most followers versus the wrong follower, or the right followers again.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other last words that you guys would like to share?
I do, in terms of branding. So when people talk about branding, people take it so personally. They see it as a representation of who they are. And that is what should be represented in their website and their social media platform and everything. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. Actually, most of the time it doesn't work that way, because when we put it from a user experience standpoint and empathy in place, it's not, the brand is for the people who is ultimately going to interact with. So it will be the final end user, which is your patients or people who come into your website, a dad looking to book an appointment for their kids, or it's the kids trying to book appointments for their parents. So we have to think about the end user in mind when we are building the brand. And it's not just about the representation of who the client is. That is always missed. And sometimes it's an oversight. It's not a matter of not having empathy. When we explain it to people this way, they suddenly start to understand, yeah, I'm not the one who goes to my website every day to book an appointment or find the location of my practice. It's my patient. It should be catered to their needs as opposed to only for me.
That's amazing. For some reason, while as you're talking, something clicked on there, and maybe like you've already talked about this already, right? Doing this from the patient's perspective. But when I think of branding, I think about how do I make myself look good? How do I make my brand look good? But really, we should be looking at how does this brand connect with our end user or customer. That's fantastic advice. Thank you very much for that. All right. Thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. Awesome, amazing advice. I think again, this was packed. There was a lot of information in here. So everybody who's watching and listening, I hope, like I said, you're writing some of this down, taking notes. I'm going to go back and listen to this again for sure and start putting some of this in my office right away. Thank you all for coming on. Peyton, Brynn, Diana, Tyler, really, really appreciate all your advice. And thank you everybody who's listening and watching. Make sure you guys check them out, Marketing4ECPs, and also make sure you tell them that Harbir sent you from the 2020 podcast. Stay tuned for another episode coming soon. That's all for the March Marketing Madness. This was the final four. I hope you loved it. I hope you guys found some lots of value from it. And if you did, make sure you share it, take a screenshot, post it up on Instagram, tell me what you thought, and I'll see you guys soon.